coming tonight. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Joyce Lane, and I am the Board Vice President for San Diego 350. And I'm a volunteer, obviously. Facilitating with me tonight are Marie Chen, who is a co-chair of our public policy team, and also David Harris, the co-chair of our Climate Action Plan and Renewable Energy Committee. Before we start, we have a couple of housekeeping items. As you just heard, we are recording this event, and the slides and the recording will be made available to you in a couple of days after this program. We're going to ask that you rename your Zoom so it includes your name and your pronouns if you'd like, and also ask that you remain muted during the forum unless you're one of the speakers. Because this is an educational forum, we'll mostly have several different presentations, but we will take questions several times during the event. You can enter your comments and questions in the chat, and we will select a couple to address during each Q&A period. For those questions we aren't able to get to, we'll include responses in our follow-up email. And if there are those we still don't have answers to, our CAP committee, our Climate Action Plan committee, will make sure to get the answers from the county as we go through this process. Next slide. I'd like to start with the Kumiyai land acknowledgement. Today, we are standing on the ancestral lands of the Kumiyai people, the original native inhabitants of San Diego County. The Kumiyai have lived in this region for more than 10,000 years. Kumiyai lands once extended from the Pacific Ocean south to Encinita, east to the sand dunes of the Colorado River, and north to Warner Springs Valley. Today, we pay respect to the Kumiyai elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. Thank you. Next slide. San Diego 350 is building a climate movement to prevent the worst impacts of climate change and climate injustice through public policy advocacy, education and outreach, and mobilizing people to take action. Currently, we have 15 volunteer teams. Tonight, we're going to talk about the importance of advocacy and how we can take action at the County of San Diego. Next slide. So why now? We are in a climate crisis. The recent IPCC report, Code Red for Humanity, makes it clear that we need bold climate action now. We must eliminate carbon emissions as quickly as possible. The election of progressive supervisors mean that action is possible now. And we've seen that there is the will to make the changes we need. The county has the opportunity to lead the region with a strong climate action plan and a regional decarbonization framework with a vision that includes the county, the 18 cities, the port, the San Diego Association of Governments, SANDAG, the Metropolitan Transit System, MTS, and the school districts to get the region to zero carbon by 2035. Next slide. We also know what needs to be done. Over the past 10 years, San Diego 350 has been organizing and advocating for real solutions to address the climate crisis. We have been and are still advocating for a better system of public transit that gets people to work, school, and other places they need to go more efficiently. We are advocating for 100% renewable energy through community choice programs, all electric buildings, and smart growth near transit. In all of our advocacy efforts, we promote a plan that centers equity for communities of concern and a just transition for the workers who will be displaced. While we have more opportunities at the county now more than ever before, there are no guarantees that they will be able to adopt strong climate policies and implement effective measures to reduce carbon emissions to zero by 2035. As with any kind of change, we need to be strategic and persistent and think about how we can mobilize San Diegans and influence the Board of Supervisors and other elected officials in the region. We've started a strategy, but we'll need your help organizing climate activists and other San Diegans to make it happen. Tonight is an opportunity to learn about how the County of San Diego works, the opportunities and challenges to a zero carbon future, and the ways you can get involved. San Diego 350 will be organizing additional events as strategic plans move forward. We hope you will join us in this effort. Marie, can you take a picture of the group?
I certainly can.
Thank you.
Okay, fantastic, everybody. So because of such a good turnout tonight, it's going to take me a couple of shots to get all of you guys in there. So if you feel like it, and we would love it if you would, go ahead and share your video with us and get ready to put on a big smile. And if you really don't want to be in the photo now, then you should stop sharing your video. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Great, and one more. 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marie. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to David Harris to give us a program overview and introduce our next speaker.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for being here. We have an exciting program tonight with several presentations. We're going to start with the county's vision for net zero carbon, moving on to a regional decarbonization framework. Then I'm going to talk about navigating the county bureaucracy. Then we'll have a presentation on the climate action plan update. And we'll close with what the county needs to do to reach zero carbon by 2035 and San Diego 350 calls to action. Next, I want to introduce our guest, Terra Lawson-Remer. She will be
Hi.
Hi, Terra.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Let me do a short intro. Terra Lawson-Remer is an economist, attorney, and expert who is public policy expert who has dedicated her life to working for social, environmental, and economic justice. A native San Diegan, Terra earned her law degree and PhD from NYU. She has worked with the United Nations and governments worldwide to advance sustainable development and economic inclusion. I want to tell you about some of Terra's experience. She helped the World Bank create a climate finance program, which funds clean energy projects around the world. And as the senior advisor in the Obama administration, she developed policies to cut pollution from oil extraction. Now, after a well-organized grassroots campaign last fall, District 3 voters elected Terra to the Board of Supervisors. Terra Lawson-Remer is a climate champion who fully embodies the popular slogan, think globally, act locally. We are happy to have her here tonight to share the county's vision and guiding principles for achieving net zero carbon.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So I just want to begin by saying, obviously it's a huge privilege to sit in the seat, have the opportunity to try to move the county forward in a better direction. And I think we're making progress, but that progress cannot be made without ongoing support and advocacy and work to build that movement from all the people on this call today. We're only as strong as your voices, and I'm only able to move an agenda when I'm able to point to the tens and hundreds of thousands of people across San Diego who are demanding that that agenda be moved. And that's why the work that you do day in and day out is so valuable and so important. And I'm just so thankful for your leadership that's tireless and often thankless, and more vital than I think you could possibly even realize sometimes when you're out there getting discouraged. Don't be discouraged. It is making a difference. So I think we all understand the urgency of this moment. I don't need to spend time on this call talking about the vital importance of climate action and taking action on climate now. What I wanted to spend a few moments talking about is what we can do here in the county of San Diego to move forward as rapidly as possible towards a green climate future. I want to talk about a few different pieces of that work, all of which is important. I'll start with something that we won't talk about much on this call, but I do think it's important for people to have in your radar as something that is going to be a big piece of what we're working on over the next couple years. And that is the SANDAG plan to invest in more transit alternatives, to move folks away from over-reliance on cars and towards reliance and ability to rely on walking, biking, trains, electric vehicles, and a lot of other alternatives that are really important as we imagine a future and as we work to build a future that doesn't require us sitting in our cars an hour and a half each way, idling in traffic and polluting carbon emissions along the way. And I just put that out there because I know that this is something that when I'm talking to people in my neighborhood, that people ask about all the time. And so on the ballot in 2022 will be a initiative to fund to fund investments in our transit infrastructure. And that's definitely an important part of the work that we need to do. And it should be on the radar of everyone here that that's not going to be easy to get that ballot measure passed. And I'm hoping that you all are beginning to think and strategize about how you can tell your friends, your neighbors, and really begin to organize to get the votes that we need to get that ballot measure passed. Craig asked 2022, not MTS, from SANDAG. It's a regional transit initiative, not just the city of San Diego. It's about the entire region of San Diego County. So I'm sure my team will be happy to answer questions. I'm always happy to answer questions, but that is something I hope everyone's aware of, because it's really a moment for voters to take action and to take direct action. It's not just about advocacy, it's about turning in votes to get the votes that we need to build those transit investments towards a net zero carbon in the very near future. So I think is just to kick us off. Want to make sure we're focused on that. Secondly, want to talk a bit about what we're doing just within the county. And a big part of what we're doing in the county are two pieces. One is the climate action plan. I think a lot of people are well aware of that it's been woefully deficient for very many years. And we're luckily in a moment where we're developing a new climate action plan that should hopefully be able to meet legal minimum standards. But I also want to put out there something important, that we can do better than the minimum. And we've asked the staff and asked the team, and Kelly's here to talk about this a bit today, to explore what are called smart growth alternatives, and to look at what are some of the options on opportunities where we can support both housing to meet the needs of middle class and working class San Diegans and young people and seniors as we struggle with rising home prices, but do that in a way that builds close to where people work, close to daycare, close to restaurants, close to amenities, close to transit, so that we're really, really radically reducing our carbon footprint. And that is a big part of what we need to do is look to solve some of our big challenges around housing in ways that reduce vehicles miles traveled, reduce our reliance on cars, reduce sprawl development, and instead build infill in the right places. I won't steal Kelly's thunder, but that is a big part of it as we look at the CAP and putting together a climate action plan that does better than the bare minimum. The other piece of that we're working on in the county is the Regional Decarbonization Framework, the Regional Sustainability Plan. And this is something quite ambitious, and it's essentially a framework for how we as a county will get to zero carbon. Because to date, all of the plans have been piecemeal, city by city, jurisdiction by jurisdiction. But of course, we're an interdependent, interconnected economic zone. So you can't really think holistically or strategically about how we get to zero carbon if you're just looking at one piece of the pie at a time. And that's what this regional decarbonization framework is going to be about. It's about a regional approach. And we've really only just begun the work, which is to put out what the plan could be. But it's going to take your support, your advocacy, and your leadership to transform an idea that's just going to be a piece of paper into something that could be policy and could be implemented. Because these recommendations, these policy recommendations, some of them are going to be applicable at the county, but a lot of them are going to be recommendations that people should take to your city council, take to your planning groups, take to SANDAG, take to MTS. So it's a framework for how we as a region can get to zero carbon, and only pieces of that framework are going to be work that we as supervisors at the county can implement ourselves. So it very much is meant as a document, as a plan, as a path forward that all of us can work together to achieve through lots and lots of different lanes here in San Diego County. An important part of that, I'd say a linchpin of that work, is a green jobs future. So we've said from the beginning that we're going to ensure that that workers end up better off in a green carbon future, that workers end up doing better as we transition than they're doing today. And Murtaza has done quite a bit of work to try to figure out, and will continue to do work to try to figure out how we build good green jobs for working people here in San Diego County as we look towards our green climate zero future. So I think that you have people here who, Murtaza and Kelly both, who have a lot more interesting technical things to say than I do. But I really just want to let you all know that this is not easy. It's going to continue to be an uphill battle. There are developers who would rather pave over every inch of San Diego County from here to Anza Borrego than think about what we need to do to protect the planet for our children. And those are people and those are companies with deep, deep pockets and a lot of money. And those are not easy battles to win. Those are really, really tough battles. And those battles are ones that we fought in the past and that we need to be prepared to continue to fight over the next few months and years as we look to try to make a zero carbon emission San Diego a reality. So with that, I'd love to turn the floor back over to my host. Thank you so much for all that you're doing.
Thank you, Supervisor Lawson-Remer. And do we have time for a couple questions, Marie?
Absolutely.
Yes, we do. Anne and Wendy, do you have anything from me from chat?
This is Wendy Marie, and we don't see a specific question in the chat at this moment, but perhaps the supervisor can expound a little bit on how the county will assist cities and others to collaborate for consistency across the region, and also the allocation of resources. I mean, you mentioned yourself that it's been a patchwork approach so far, and the county is going to try and help to collaborate more. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So I think there's a couple questions. One is resources and the second is technical assistance. So that's a big part of why we did put out begin to put together this regional sustainability plan, the decarbonization framework, is because we know that a lot of the cities don't necessarily have that technical expertise. And so we're prepared and ready and standing by to be helpful in any way possible. There might be model ordinances, there might be other kind of sort of model frameworks that coming out of the development of the regional sustainability plan that we will adopt. Certainly, we're going to be assisting in any kind of sustainable building design initiatives or other kinds of initiatives where technical expertise is required. And I just want to give a shout out as well to Sandag. So I think acknowledging that some of that technical expertise will come from the county and some of that technical expertise will come from Sandag, but that is absolutely a role that we are looking forward to playing and eager to play, and very, very aware that a lot of our cities don't have the staff capacity to engage on many of these initiatives, and I'm going to be looking for what we do, how at the county we can be a partner for that. The resources is a bit of a different question, right? Because it's one thing to put together you know, basically a bank of technical expertise. It's a different thing entirely to talk about resources. That's why I think that it's so important that folks have on their radar the Sandag measure in 2022, because that's our big opportunity for resources. That is our real opportunity to raise the revenue that we need to be investing in transit alternatives. If that doesn't pass, there's not going to be money, period, full stop. So if people are have it on their radar that resources are going to be required, which I think everyone should, you know, definitely encourage people to get involved and getting the Sandag measure over the finish line.
We have one more question in the chat. Marianne asked, could you please explain, is this a net zero carbon approach or a zero carbon approach?
So it's a great question. So the regional sustainability plan is a zero carbon approach. That is specific to this regional sustainability plan. That is not congruent with a lot of the other plans that are being put out, which are net zero. So I think it's a good question because there's both kinds of planning on the table. What we are looking at in this regional sustainability plan is zero carbon, but that is not true across the board by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, thank you very much for being here tonight, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue.
Great. Well, I just want to again thank you all for inviting me. I've left my daughter alone watching Daniel Tiger, so I better go back to give her some dinner before she revolts. But thank you all so much. I really appreciate everything that you do.
Thank you for being here.
Okay, bye.
Our next presenter is Murtaza Baxamusa. In May, he was selected to fill a newly created position as Program Manager for Regional Sustainability. He is currently managing the county's efforts to forge regional collaboration on strategies that will drastically reduce carbon emissions, and in just 14 years. For the past 20 years, Murtaza has been engaged in the practice and advocacy of affordable housing and economic development for workers. Some of you may know Murtaza from his previous roles with the Family Housing Corporation or with the Center on Policy Initiatives, an institute focused on social justice for working people and families. Murtaza is passionate about a sustainable future for our planet and a sustainable economy that works for everyone in our region. Tonight, he will present the county's bold new regional approach to achieve net zero carbon. Take it away, Murtaza.
Thank you, David. So I wanted to share the stage with Supervisor Lawson-Remer because I will be providing a brief overview of the regional decarbonization framework she talked about that was directed to the staff by the Board of Supervisors. And it is a document that will guide the region towards zero carbon emissions, as she mentioned. So this is an exciting new venture that I'm really honored to be a part of, and especially because we are the first county in the nation to attempt this kind of regional vision. It's important because as this is our, it is for SD 350, it is common knowledge, but for the world, it is important because we, as sometimes when we think of global climate, we have to also think locally in our communities every day. And this affects San Diego. This includes high frequency and intensity of extreme heat events, droughts, wildfires, storms, and sea level rise that we are already seeing the effects of today, and that will exacerbate in the future. Furthermore, there will be immediate and long-term damage to our ecosystem, food production, health, safety, jobs, businesses, and the overall quality of life in the San Diego region if we do not do anything about it. So the County of San Diego is committed to reducing its carbon footprint and to lead in terms of creating climate in this climate effort. So what is, next slide, David. Simply put, what is decarbonization? It is about reducing the gases in the atmosphere that trap heat. So the goal is to achieve a balance of carbon cycle in nature so the planet stops warming. Typically, as in most decarbonization strategies, this framework uses a three-pronged approach: reducing emissions of carbon dioxide or carbon to zero, reducing super pollutants such as soot and smog, especially in the short term. Reducing them to zero will immediately have an effect of slowing down global warming. And the third is carbon storage and carbon capture through natural as well as technological means. Another great opportunity within decarbonization is that there will be new jobs in a carbon-free economy. We will be working and studying the impacts of the workforce, as Supervisor mentioned, in terms of our carbon-free economy, and see what opportunities lie for training, apprenticeship programs, and career ladders for good quality jobs. Next, following scientific evidence, nations and cities around the world have begun adopting these kind of zero carbon emissions goals. Recent examples include Ann Arbor, New York City, and Massachusetts. America's Zero Carbon Action Plan proposed by the Sustainable Development Solutions Network is a similar framework for our nation. However, our effort is different because it is a county approach. For additional context, this regionally focused framework is different from the county's climate action plan, which Kelly will be discussing, which is solely county managed, and it limits greenhouse gases from activities within the county's municipal control, and it is tied to the general plan. Next, one recent example of a zero carbon emissions plan is New York City. The city's existing policies, so without this kind of a framework, but those with the New York states reduce emissions by about 40% by mid-city. The pathways modeled in their study could reduce emissions by more than 80%. These pathways account for energy use, transportation, and buildings. Three pathways were analyzed for each of these sectors: electrification, low carbon fuel, and a diversified approach. For example, for vehicles, the electrification pathway would be 100% battery powered by a certain date, like 2050. And a low carbon fuel pathway could be a mixture of different fuels for medium and heavy duty vehicles. So that was the example from New York City. Coming to San Diego, under the direction of the land use, next slide, David. Under the direction, the county's land use and environment group, the regional zero carbon effort would be based on emerging best practices from across the nation and the globe. The county has partnered with UC San Diego's School of Global Policy and Strategy to lead the development of this framework, to ensure that equity is upheld in the framework and the local government policies that follow. University of San Diego's Energy Policy Initiative Center will compare recommended RDF policies to existing local government policies. And sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you now.
All right. So UC San Diego is utilizing 6 consultants with technical expertise in the areas of energy, transportation and land use, and buildings and industries to chart the pathways to reduce carbon. Next slide. A core consideration influencing the development of this framework are the environmental injustices the region's underserved communities have experienced to date relating to air quality, infrastructure, jobs, and housing. This framework will recommend ways to reach both equity and zero carbon goals for the region. It will be prepared in coordination with our new Office of Environmental and Climate Justice and informed by the lived experiences of Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. Next, here's the timeline for the development of the framework. We started in July, and now we're roughly a little after the public workshop. Some of you attended that. After we have a draft technical reports from UC San Diego team in October, we will be sending out a public notice and making them available for public review. We will also be seeking input from the Board of Supervisors on the report, and later have our technical working group review these reports. In the following months, after we receive the draft technical reports, and as we are developing the possible policy pathways, we will be doing public outreach in different communities. In these meetings, we will be asking for your input into the policy measures to make these pathways possible. The Board of Supervisors will consider adoption of the final framework in early 2022. In summary, these are the key steps in developing the framework. The modeling of the data can provide science-based pathways that will then inform the basis of policy recommendations. Actual decarbonization results will come from its adoption and the implementation of policies enacted by various jurisdictions. It is important to emphasize that this framework is aspirational, and the actual results will come from the implementation measures following its adoption. This is a partnership between the public and private sectors, such as business and community groups and governmental agencies. We want the buy-in of business, labor, environment, and community stakeholders. We are at the first step today. And as we begin this journey towards our collective future, thank you for climbing these steps with us.
Thank you so much, Murtaza. That was extremely helpful. So Anne and Wendy, do we have any questions?
Go ahead, Anne.
Sorry, I was muted. How viable do you think carbon capture and storage is for San Diego County? And what percentage of the total funding for the RDF will be put towards carbon capture and storage?
So there is no funding associated with the implementation at this time. The measures that are selected for implementation will be put in place in early 2022. As to how much of the decarbonization effort will rely on carbon capture and storage, my sense is like we are not analyzing that pathway. This is really a question about emissions and how do we reduce emissions. The carbon capture and storage technology would be overlaid on top of what emissions reductions happen. So I don't know if that answers your question, but when we discuss the pathways that we analyzed, we're not factoring that in as like a share of emissions.
Thank you. This is Wendy. We have another question from the chat. Ann Sheridan asks, will the county also look at embodied, is it embodied, Ann, or embedded carbon, or conducting life cycle analyses as part of the RDF? Is that your vision?
Yes, I did ask this question. So this is it's a methodological question, and in terms of the methods that have been used so far, because it's fuels-based pathways that they're using, embodied carbon is not included in their math, in their analysis.
Thank you,
Now,
Murtaza.
I understand that to get to zero carbon for buildings, you have to consider the life cycle of buildings. So I think that these are good methodological questions to put in the parking lot to raise, to complete more further analysis. In other words, the answers we're getting today on building decarbonization are probably not sufficient. This work, there's a lot more needs to be done.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And David, would you like to take it from here?
Yes, so before we get into the county CAP presentation, that's the climate action plan, I want to provide a broad overview of the county government to help you navigate the bureaucracy. Next. So the county is a large governmental agency with a budget of $7 billion and over 18,000 employees. By comparison, the city of San Diego has a budget of $4 billion and employs 11,000 employees. So in the county unincorporated communities, there's 450,000 residents spread out over 3,500 square miles. Here's a map of the 5 supervisorial districts. The districts here, 1, 3, and 4 are urbanized for the most part, whereas districts 2 and 5, the North County and East County, include more of the unincorporated communities. And here are our Board of Supervisors. Nora Vargas, Joel Anderson, and Terra were all elected in November of 2020 and are serving their first terms on the Board of Supervisors. And Nathan Fletcher is currently the chair of the board. Next. The county has a strategic plan, and this plan includes a vision, a region that is building better health, living safely, and thriving. And its mission is to efficiently provide public services that build strong, sustainable communities with the values of integrity, stewardship, and commitment. Next. In the strategic plan is this goal. The region is a leader in protecting and promoting our natural and agricultural resources, diverse habitats, and sensitive species, and an objective to enhance the quality of the environment by focusing on sustainability, pollution prevention, and strategic planning. Next. Here are the head honchos of the county. Helen Robbins Meyer is the Chief Administrative Officer, and Michael Vu is Assistant CAO. Next. Now there are 4 Deputy Chief Administrative Officers. Each one heads up one of the 4 groups: Public Safety, Health and Human Services, Land Use and Environment, Finance and General Government. Each group includes multiple departments and functions. Next. Let's take a look at LUGE, the Land Use and Environment Group. It's headed up by Sarah Agassi. She oversees 6 departments: planning, public works, environmental health, parks and rec, library, and agriculture. Next. Now, the county has jurisdiction over certain types of regulation and some things not as only for parts of the county. So when it comes to environmental activities, they have countywide authority to regulate environmental health, air pollution, agriculture, watershed protection, and solid waste landfills. But when it comes to land use and zoning, the authority is limited just to the unincorporated communities and rural areas. This also applies for housing development projects, building code enforcement, and under the Climate Action Plan, greenhouse gas reductions. Next. Let's take a look at planning and development services. They are responsible for long-range planning, land development, building, and project planning. And within this department is sustainability planning. And we have several representatives tonight who are going to talk in just a few minutes about the Climate Action Plan. Kelly Bray is Chief of Sustainability Planning. She manages a budget of $105 million. Now, more than 3/4 of this is for protecting natural and agricultural resources. $32 million of the budget is for tackling the climate crisis, with 19 million of the 32 million for sustainability planning programs and projects. So what are these programs and projects? Well, here's some of the examples. The county has a green building program for developers. It has rooftop solar incentives for homeowners. It has EV charging stations, solid waste diversion, and tree planting. And here we have a photo of an award-winning building, the County Operations Center, that received a platinum level LEED certification for energy efficiency design. Next. Now, some of the long-range plans that have been developed and adopted include the general plan in 2011 that includes land use, mobility, conservation, and safety elements. And just this year, a new element, the environmental justice, was created. And also the housing element was updated this year. Other plans related to climate include the renewable energy plan and strategic plan to reduce waste. And then, of course, the climate action plan, which was adopted in 2018 and is still current. Next. However, the 2018 county cap is flawed. Over the past decade, the county has approved general plan amendments that allow large residential development, that is urban sprawl. These projects are in rural areas far from jobs and transit, which means more vehicle miles traveled, more greenhouse gases. Now, the Sierra Club and Cleveland National Forest Foundation and others sued the county over its cap, not once, not twice, but I believe 3 times. And one of the key reasons is that the 2018 cap lacks enforceable GHG reduction measures. It also allows developers to purchase carbon offsets anywhere in the country, in fact, anywhere in the world, without any ability to monitor and without any benefits for San Diego County. So as a result of the last lawsuit, the appeals court ordered the county to evaluate smart growth alternatives as mitigation with the next cap update. Next. But county is changing course on climate policy, as you've already heard tonight from Terra and Murtaza. And in the energy sector, just last month, the County Board of Supervisors approved joining San Diego Community Power. That's our community choice program serving 5 cities. They also approved a 600-acre, 90-megawatt solar farm near Acumba. It was a bit controversial, but this project was necessary for San Diego Community Power to enter into a long-term contract for renewable energy. And the county also streamlined permitting process for large battery storage projects. Next. So now a new process is underway for the county cap update. Beginning in January, the county's held a series of workshops on various elements of the plan, which you can see listed here. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Bray, the Chief of Sustainability Planning, to talk about the county's climate action plan update and introduce her sustainability planning team. Take it away, Kelly.
Thanks, David. That's an incredible amount of research. I just have to say, if you ever go that deep on the city of San Diego, can you please invite me? Because I can't figure that place out. And I live here. Very, very nice to be here. I have wanted to join this group for really several years. It's just that when you work in local government, it gets to be a little tricky. And so it's hard to have a personal advocacy mission as well as a local government position of any stature. So I'm very, very grateful to be here and to have some time on your agenda this evening. Thank you so much for the great introduction. I am the Chief of Sustainability Planning. It's a bit of a new role to me. In fact, I came back to the county in early 2019 to manage the flawed 2018 cap. We didn't know it was flawed at the time. I, in fact, wrote most of the EIR that ultimately went down. So what are you going to do? You know, CEQA. Here I am managing the program now. I do want to tell you all that I am an environmental advocate. I have been my whole life. I went to school for environmental science and policy undergrad and got a planning degree. So my professional life has been sort of meandering through environmental planning. So to be in this role is really just amazing. It's just such a great opportunity to have the staff we have, to have the leadership, frankly. I was here sort of in the bad old days, as I call them. And so it's really nice to be on the good side of things these days to really hope to see change. I just want to thank you so much. And I want to introduce, we have 3 team members with us tonight. We actually have a team of 7 working on the climate action plan, including, not including myself, so 8 total. I want to introduce Joe Cryer. He is new to the county. He's been with us about 3 weeks. He's actually going to take my old position, which is formally called Climate Action Plan Project Manager. So we're going to work him into the mix as he comes up to speed. He's coming to us from SCAG, which is San Diegans' neighbor to the north, right? The MPO up there for LA County. He's got a host of sustainability experience, including electric vehicles. He's done some conservation work. He worked on their sustainable community strategy. If you're familiar with what Supervisor Remer was discussing, our sustainable community strategy. So he's bringing a wealth of experience. Please welcome Joe when you meet Joe at some point. You all will be seeing him around. I also have Tyler Farmer with us tonight. He's currently our sustainability planning manager. I call him my right-hand man. I couldn't have done it without Tyler as we were building the team and building all these programs out. Our span of control has gotten much broader. We're doing electric vehicles and all kinds of things in addition to the cap. So Tyler has been in sustainability for well over a decade as well. He used to work for the city of San Diego. Speaking of them, we were fortunate enough to get him to come and join us. He basically manages a lot of the sustainability efforts. I have been bringing him more on the climate action plan side, so you'll see him as well. Before that, he was a sustainability consultant with his own firm. And last but not least, we have Megan Kelly. She's one of our senior planners. In fact, she predates me to this program. She's from some of the older crew. Great senior planner. She describes herself as a conservationist at heart. I would say she's one of the most sustainable people I've ever met in my life. I don't think she's bought a stitch of clothing in 10 years. She makes her own stuff, right? So that's how she rolls. So she's going to do our presentation for us tonight. I mentioned to David earlier in an email, I'm sure that you all have lots of questions and you will have lots of questions after this presentation. We are more than happy to come back. We want to come back, in fact. So let's just consider this the first of many conversations. I'm really glad that Supervisor Remer gave the plug for the smart growth alternative. I think that's something that we would want to have a separate conversation about in depth. There's a lot to it, but it's really important. It's a really important part of this project. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. I think I'm turning it over to Megan Kelly, if I'm not mistaken, but thanks again. We'll try to answer as many questions as we have time for after this.
Thanks, Kelly, for the introduction. We're just pulling up the slides. So we'll start off with our presentation, which is an introduction to the county's climate action plan update. So next slide, please. So first, I'd like to provide a quick intro on what a CAP or a climate action plan is and how these plans are developed. Just to make sure everyone's on the same page. I know there's a lot of knowledge on the topic in the room tonight, but basically a climate action plan, or what we say is a CAP, is a roadmap for a more sustainable future for everyone in the county. And the CAP's primary purpose is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in order to reduce the impacts of climate change in our community. So this is accomplished through the implementation of a series of policies, programs, or initiatives that result in real, quantifiable, and permanent greenhouse gas reductions. Next slide, please. So in January of this year, the board provided a framework for the future to take bold steps with the Climate Action Plan update that would establish the county as a leader by calling for a net zero carbon emissions goal with an equity focus. So to achieve this, the Climate Action Plan update will use updated data and modeling to establish policies that ensure greenhouse gas emission reductions. So this work will be shaped by robust community engagement, and the CAP update will center environmental justice and equity in order to recognize and address climate impacts experienced by our most vulnerable unincorporated communities. Next slide, please. So the Climate Action Plan update will result in the development of programs and actions that mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and achieve complementary benefits. And these include clean air, expanded access to sustainable energy sources, efficient use of water supplies, and expansion of the green economy, just to name a few. So this project will help our communities adapt to the changing climate by becoming more resilient to the effects of climate change. Next slide, please. Thanks. So here's a project boundary for the CAP update. The county's Climate Action Plan focuses on the areas in blue, and this is where the county has land use jurisdiction, as described by David earlier. And the CAP also includes emissions associated with county operating county facilities, regardless of their location. So although the county's Climate Action Plan does not reduce greenhouse gas emissions from cities throughout the region, most cities in the county do have their own caps that focus on reducing emissions within their own jurisdictional boundary. And I urge you to check out those documents if you live in one of the 18 cities in our region. Next slide, please. So on this slide, I'd like to highlight several key steps for the CAP update project. First, we'll complete a greenhouse gas emissions inventory and forecast for unincorporated community emissions and from emissions from county operations. So this means we'll look at county facilities and the community as a whole to determine where our greenhouse gas emissions are coming from. Next, we'll use this inventory and forecast to set greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, and this will be consistent with state legislation and board direction. So the board has requested that we strive to achieve net zero emissions between 2035 to 2045, which means that we're planning to reduce as much greenhouse gases that we will produce within this time frame. Then we'll begin the development of CAP measures, which will reduce greenhouse gases and provide other complementary benefits. And these reduction measures will be organized into 5 emission sectors that you can see on the slide. They include built environment and transportation, energy, water and wastewater, solid waste, and agriculture and conservation. The CAP update will also include the development of an environmental document that will evaluate the environmental impacts associated with implementing the CAP update. And ultimately, both documents will be brought to the Board of Supervisors for approval. Next slide, please. So a major component of the CAP update will be the development of CAP measures. The measure development process will begin by working with the public and stakeholders to determine what a net zero emissions future looks like within each of the 5 greenhouse gas emission sectors that were introduced on the previous slide. Net zero emissions means that the CAP update would reduce all of the greenhouse gas emissions we're producing in the community and in county operations by 2035 to 2045 without purchasing carbon offsets. Preparation of a vision statement will help staff to identify strategies that can meet the goal of net zero emissions while also focusing on efforts that improve equitable outcomes by prioritizing complementary benefits such as clean air and water, new clean energy and manufacturing jobs, and increased access to clean transportation, just to name a few. These are just examples. Measures from the county's previous CAP or 2018 CAP will be evaluated for opportunities to expand or revise to achieve additional emission reductions, and new CAP measures will be developed by leveraging opportunities to expand existing regulations or incentivize new, less carbon intensive behavior. Measures that are quantifiable and contribute to the 2030 greenhouse gas emission reduction target or net zero emissions goal will be included in the CAP update. Actions that are not quantifiable but support a net zero emissions goal, so for example, changes in legislative policy, regional collaboration, or actions that address equity, would also be included in the CAP update, but will not be counted toward quantifiable emission reduction targets. Next slide, please. So the CAP update will include the development of a California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, environmental document. And this is called the Supplemental Environmental Impact Report, or Supplemental EIR. So as mentioned earlier, this document will evaluate the environmental impacts associated with implementing the CAP update, including the measures that are developed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So in this document, CEQA requires the supplemental EIR include and evaluate alternatives to the CAP update that would reduce significant impacts from the project. The supplemental EIR for the CAP update will include at least one smart growth alternative. So this alternative should reduce vehicle miles traveled, or often referred to as VMT. Now, smart growth areas for new development in the unincorporated area could include compact, efficient, and environmentally friendly design, proximity to job centers, services, and amenities, and or presence of mobility infrastructure or other considerations. So adoption of a smart growth alternative by the board is optional, but if the action is taken, it would achieve greenhouse gas emission reductions beyond what the CAP measures can do alone by incentivizing new housing and services in a way that would reduce VMT and therefore reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector. Next slide, please. So public outreach and participation is at the core of the CAP update process. Staff have been engaging with our diverse stakeholders to ensure the CAP update is shaped by community input. Since January, we've hosted 6 public workshops with over 500 participants total throughout all of those workshops on topics including introduction to the CAP update and supplemental EIR, an equity focused workshop, an introduction to smart growth alternatives, and workshops focused on measure development for the CAP emission sectors. If you're interested in learning more about these past workshops, all of our workshop materials, including recordings, summaries of the input that we've received, are available on our website, which I'll provide at the end of this presentation. And our next workshop is actually on September 29th, so it's coming up. And this will focus on measure development for the agriculture and conservation emission sectors. So I've seen a lot of comments in the chat box pertaining to this sector, so I encourage you to join us for that workshop. We'll add the link to that sign up in the chat box later as well. So staff are also meeting with individual community groups, various industry stakeholders, and with individuals to gather feedback on what's important to them. This feedback is being integrated into draft conceptual measures, which we will discuss in future workshops. So in addition to all of this, we'll be using various platforms to continue to engage a diverse stakeholder base. Planned engagement includes the use of large format virtual public workshops, project website and email updates, social media campaigns, stakeholder interviews, presentations to community, business, and special interest groups, multi-platform surveys, and in-person events. So we're also developing methods to reach broader audiences. We're including language accessible materials and more interactive content, such as videos, polling questions, and others, just trying to get as broad of a reach as possible with our outreach. So future opportunities for you to get involved in this project, the CAP update and the supplemental EIR will be announced on our website, and we send out notices by email. So please be sure to sign up for our mailing list. We'll also include that on the last slide, how to sign up for that if you're not already. So next slide, please. So finally, just to conclude our presentation tonight, I'd like to highlight the CAP update's next steps. The project team is currently working on several aspects of this project at the same time, and this includes processing the greenhouse gas emissions data and continuing to work toward a complete emissions inventory and projections. I'm considering which of the 2018 CAP measures to include in the CAP update and whether to expand them, developing an approach to identify new CAP measures, and preparing the supplemental EIR, which includes the smart growth alternatives. So looking ahead, we'll continue to develop these conceptual CAP measures, and we anticipate those measures being the subject of future upcoming workshops. And so, as I've mentioned already, please be sure to review our website where we have past workshop recordings and summaries of stakeholder feedback that we've received, so that you're interested, so that you can get up to date on what we've heard so far. And next slide, please. So I just want to say thank you again for your time, for inviting us to come present to you tonight. It's a great privilege to be here with everyone and get a chance to talk to you. We'll just leave our contact information up here, so you can reach out to us directly. That web address there will take you to our website, and you'll find that sign up button at the bottom of our website where you can sign up for regular updates and also our newsletter, to keep informed on this project as it continues on. So thank you again.
And we have time for just one question,
All
but we
right.
will follow up on the other questions.
Anne and Wendy, can you give me a question?
Wendy, did you want to?
Yes, I do. Sorry, I was muted. As Megan pointed out, we've had a number of comments in the chat about agriculture, benefits of regenerative farming, carbon sequestration from healthy soil, and some interesting historical facts about agriculture in San Diego. But here's a question that B. Alvarez poses. Why aren't agricultural jobs ever included in green jobs? Seems like we have a huge oversight that we hope isn't left out of the workforce plan Supervisor Vargas was announcing. What kind of incentives can be advocated for in this plan to help industry transition to solar, electrical, and other climate smart practices? What types of shovel-ready projects can we include in the plan to be ready when federal infrastructure money starts to flow? That's the question.
That's a great question with a lot of different facets. I think I'll start off with the green jobs piece is that, you know, when we say green jobs, we mean any job that can be made green. So that would include agricultural jobs. And I do invite everyone here to come to our next workshop on the 29th, where we'll discuss our approach with the agricultural and conservation sector, because it will be slightly different from the 2018 CAPS approach. And we do recognize, you know, the value of natural and working lands and how those can be preserved and better managed to help the county achieve our net zero carbon emission goals. And then in terms of shovel-ready jobs, that is also something that we'll consider. You know, we've had several, I know that you spoke to solar in the question itself. We've had several measures in our 2018 CAP that focused on, you know, clean energy projects and clean energy incentives and programs, and we will continue to pursue those as the county, you know, is looking to increase the use of renewable energy, as you saw through joining the CCE, as mentioned earlier tonight. And we will also consider how to expand on these past successes in the CAP update as well. So that's something that we will discuss, you know, once we get these conceptual measures and have future workshops to make everyone aware of what's more shovel ready versus not, and how we can collaborate with partners to make sure that we're competitive in getting, you know, funding to our region to fund these clean efforts.
Well, thank you, Megan, and we look forward to further engagement with your team to find out more answers that we have questions about.
Yeah, unfortunately, we only have that time for that one, but we will be reaching out to get you responses on those others. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And now the upcoming panelists are San Diego 350 leaders who lead our advocacy efforts on our priority policy areas and ensure that our work centers equity and justice. They will discuss what San Diego 350 wants the county to do to reach zero carbon by 2035. B. Mittermiller is the chair of San Diego 350's Transportation Committee and will talk about transportation policies needed. Ann Feeney is co-chair of San Diego 350's Building Electrification Committee and the San Diego Building Electrification Coalition's Strategy and Steering Committees. She will present on electrifying new business and buildings, otherwise known as building electrification. Craig Jones is a valued member of the Transportation Committee and a former city planner and will speak about smart growth alternatives. Kiala Minna is a youth leader of San Diego 350's Youth for Climate team, and she will tell you about the upcoming global climate strike. B, would you like to take it from here?
Sure, thanks, Marie. So because transportation is a leading source of greenhouse gas emissions in the county, around 40% of total emissions, this is an area where we want the county to focus. Reducing the amount of driving, as well as improved public transportation and increased active transportation, walking, biking, is the key to success. Fortunately, the state passed SB 743 in 2013, which changed the method of analyzing transportation impacts and related development. However, the former board created a transportation study guide that was flawed and triggered a lawsuit by the Sierra Club, the Cleveland National Forest Foundation, and the Coastal Environmental Rights Foundation. The good news is that yesterday, the Board of Supervisors voted to rescind this flawed transportation study guide, while also continuing the staff's instructions to analyze 13 related items to craft a bold, progressive transportation study guide. We'll be advocating throughout this process. And now I will pass this off to Ann Feeney.
Hi. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the building electrification program that we have going. So San Diego 350 has a building electrification team. And last fall, we decided to establish a coalition of many organizations so that we could advocate successfully for building electrification throughout the region, for the county and for the 18 cities within the county. The San Diego Building Electrification Coalition now is a group of 26 member organizations. And what we are advocating for is for all electric reach codes for new construction. So reach codes allow a municipality to require all electric new building construction sooner than the California Energy Commission would require it. And to date, 49 cities and counties of California have passed electric reach codes or passed again a ban on new construction. So why do we want to do this? Buildings are second only behind transportation for greenhouse gas emissions. And burning methane in buildings accounts for 15% of California's greenhouse gas emissions. And that does not even take into account the leakage from extraction sites. And methane is 84 times more potent as a global warming agent than CO2. So for building electrification, space heating and water heating can be accomplished through heat pump water heaters and heat pump space heaters. And so those are the main technologies that are used now. They're extremely efficient. And together they account for about 85% of the greenhouse gas emissions from the building sector. But in addition, even though stoves only account for 7% of the greenhouse gas emissions, because of the health impacts of burning methane gas inside the homes, we really want to eliminate the stoves also from the ordinances. And if you're going to put in natural gas infrastructure just for putting in a gas stove, then you're going to prolong the gas infrastructure. You're going to have the methane gas. You're going to have more pipelines that are going there and more potential leaks. So for the health impacts, we're really concerned about the indoor air pollution from the stoves. And also, building all electric homes are cheaper to build because you don't have the gas infrastructure to the house. And all electric homes can save you on the monthly charges because the heat pump water heater and space heating are very efficient. And the heat pump will also give you air conditioning with the same unit. Now, I just want to highlight one very recent efforts from our advocacy, which is in Encinitas. And Encinitas is poised to pass the first major building electrification ordinance in our region. They've been working on this for quite a while. SDBEC members have come and spoken at city council meetings. We've talked individually to city council members and to the mayor. They came up with a draft ordinance that was quite strong, but it had some exceptions that we didn't like, such as they allowed gas stoves, they allowed ADUs. And we went and talked to the individual city council members and mayor again and explained why there were good all electric alternatives for the exceptions that they had. So we were very pleased at the August 18th meeting that the city council decided to make their building electrification ordinance stronger. And they asked to take out the gas stoves and take out the allowance for ADUs to have gas hookups. And so it's coming back next week for Encinitas to have a very strong building electrification ordinance for its first reading. And that will be the first big one. And we have just heard that Solana Beach is also on Wednesday next week, also coming up with a good building electrification ordinance for a first draft for their city council to consider. So I just would like to conclude that we're in a code red. IPCC report says that, so we must stop burning fossil fuels now, and we would like to see that in the building sector, and we hope that the county will also follow through with a strong building electrification, all electric ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And up next, we have Craig Jones, who will talk about smart growth alternatives.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you, everybody. Just real quickly, thanks to the Kelly Squared team for bringing us more detailed information about the county's upcoming planning. You've heard bits and pieces. You've heard a lot about VMT, vehicle miles traveled, the climate action plan, and the regional decarbonization plan. All of these integrate with each other. All are necessary for us to reach the goal of successfully addressing climate change. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about VMT, vehicle miles traveled, and how that relates to the climate action plan and to the county's jurisdiction over land use. Hopefully what you see on screen here is a map that looks a little bit similar to one of the maps that was presented before. This makes a little bit more dramatically clear how our San Diego County region, and you can see the entire map is the San Diego County region, how it's separated in between the incorporated cities that are clustered here on the western side against the coast. Those are all of the 18 incorporated cities of our region. The rest of this is the unincorporated county. It's the cities that have land use jurisdiction over development that happens within their boundaries. The county has jurisdiction over land use development in the rest of this area. What we have today is in the unincorporated areas along the western edge, that's where the incredible lion's share of existing development, of employment, of access to healthcare services and recreational resources, that's where the huge majority of places that people need to get to on a daily and monthly basis need to get to. That's why it's important to concentrate continued development in this clustered area in order for us to reduce vehicle miles traveled. While electric cars are going to be an important part of our solution, electric cars won't really supplant carbon burning cars for decades and decades. So vehicle miles traveled, VMT, is going to be an incredibly important thing to address and to make sure we reduce. While we'll have carbon burning cars and trucks continue to operate for quite some time, it'll be important to try to concentrate that in the existing urbanized area. As development continues, the county, if the county continues to do what the old Board of Supervisors did, which is to violate their own general plan and to approve urbanization and suburbanization in this unincorporated area, you're going to automatically increase the number of vehicle miles traveled of every trip that people need to go. And you can see that just makes common sense. It takes longer to get from these areas to any other part of the county and to the employment centers, recreational centers, healthcare, food access, and all of that in the concentrated Western area. So it's incredibly crucial for the city's plans in terms of the county's plans in terms of how they regulate and approve land use, and the climate action plan to make sure that land use sprawl in the county area is eliminated. It has to be eliminated. And this ultimately is a political issue because it's the elected Board of Supervisors that approve or not approve things. It'll be, as you heard, the climate action plan, because of the legal action against the previous inadequate plan, it must include in its supplemental EIR a smart growth alternative. This was required by the court in letting this move forward. It's kind of a technicality, but the preferred project in the supplemental EIR will be the old climate action plan. The inclusion of a smart growth alternative is vital because it's the smart growth alternative that we want to have make sure stops land use sprawl in the unincorporated county area. This will be very, very important. We must lobby for a smart growth alternative in the climate action plan. That smart growth alternative must eliminate county land use sprawl. And finally, when the county adopts the new climate action plan, it must adopt that smart growth alternative. These are key steps along the way that we need everybody to be involved in. So that's my spiel, and I want to pass this on now to Kayla Mina, who will provide our information about our action coming up.
Thank you so much. That's awesome, Craig, and so good to hear. I'm Kayla Mina, and I'm the new Youth Fuel Oil intern, and I'm going to be talking a little bit today about taking all what we learned and taking it into direct action, and in specific through the Youth Global Climate Strikes. So what are the global climate strikes? First, I'm going to give a little bit of background. So in 2019, if you were around then, SD 350 hosted a series of climate strikes throughout schools and throughout San Diego County, where over 5,500 youth and adult supporters showed up to protest climate action. This year, I know we couldn't do it as much last year because of COVID, but we are hosting in-person events throughout San Diego County where youth and adult supporters will have the opportunity to strike and protest on 3 main demands. So at the first local level, we will be protesting the climate action plan and kind of advocating for a real zero carbon plan by 2030. So something that we discussed about here. At the state level, we will be protesting for the Youth Fuel Oil petition. So stopping new oil and gas or new oil permits and fracking permits, and then also implementing 2,500 foot setbacks between communities and oil sites. And then lastly, within that, we will be working to advocate for a just transition away from fossil fuels and into green energy. Lastly, at the national level, we will be protesting for the Thrive agenda and for the reconciliation bill to have our senators sign on to the Thrive agenda and our state representatives. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. And I really encourage you all to join. It's going to be, if you are in Chula Vista, there's going to be a downtown Chula Vista event at 10 a.m. at Friendship Park, and we'll march around 3rd and back to Chula Vista City Hall with a bunch of students from Sweetwater School District. And our main event will be the downtown climate strike, and that will be on the east side of the San Diego County Administration Building at 1:30, and we will march to San Diego City Hall. So I'm going to send the registration link in the chat. Oh, Murtaza already did. Still on top of it. And I highly encourage you to join. Again, this is on September 24th. So next Friday, please attend and ask me if you have any questions. Now I'm going to pass it back to Marie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kiala. Next up, we have Katie Meyer, who is San Diego 350's new campaign coordinator, and she will talk to you about the urgency of this climate crisis.
Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Meyer. I am the campaign coordinator with San Diego 350, and I am here to talk to you about why it is so important for you to take action right now. Personally, I am 26 years old, and I am utterly terrified at what the future holds for me if we do not take serious action right now. I am worried not just about my generation, but future generations who will not know a life without dealing with the worst effects of climate change. Catastrophic events caused by climate change is not some distant thing, but it is currently happening right now. And here are three news headlines from the last month, just the last month, of events. We've seen record fires, record heat waves in the Northwest, a hurricane with flooding and devastation affecting a third of the US, and a drought on top of that. Next slide. I look at this chart of the top 20 wildfires in California history. Look at how over half of these have been in 2020 and 2021, and we are not at the worst of fire season yet. We are already feeling the effects of climate change. We not only will see more fires, more extreme weather, more hurricanes, more infectious diseases, more drought, more sea level rise, more destruction of ecosystems, more extinction of species, more pollution, more asthma, more food shortages, and that is only scratching the surface of what we will experience if we do not act now. Next slide. These events will affect the most marginalized communities worldwide the worst. And this slide shows some of the groups that are most at risk. They will face worse levels of pollution, asthma, flooding, and deaths and exposure due to extreme temperatures. We have a moral obligation to do something and make sure we are intersectional in our approach. Next slide. The last month, IPCC released a report that should really be a wake-up call for everyone. The head of the IPCC described this as a code red for humanity. We are on track to reach 2 degrees of warming, which that may not sound a lot, but it is. By 2050, and many of these effects will be irreversible. Climate change threatens everything about life as we know it. Everything we love and everything we care about is on the line. Lives are on the line. Our future is on the line. Next slide. Right now, the county has the potential to lead the nation in reducing emissions and combating this crisis. If we want to address this crisis, we really need all hands on deck and taking action. And that means we need your help in getting this message to the general public and to elected officials, that if we do not have a future, if we do not act now and take this crisis seriously. Next slide. This picture right here is the Climate Chaos Express. It is the embodiment of all things bad due to climate, and our Raise the Alarm team is working through nonviolent direct action to get people to really see the urgency of the climate change. This van will be appearing at many events that we are doing on the county level. And I really hope that all of you can get involved in this effort. And there are also many, many exciting efforts that are happening right now at the board level. Marie's going to describe some ways that you can help and that you can get involved, but I really hope that you all sign up for at least one action tonight. Our futures depend on it. Thank you all so much. I'm going to pass it on over to.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. There are things you can do to help us all combat the climate crisis. Just consider calls to action your personal next step. We outline some actions here and we'll send notices of future calls to action that you can take. There's a county climate action update workshop, as was discussed earlier, and it focuses on agriculture and conservation. Please register to attend, and San Diego 350 will provide talking points to anyone who wants to comment and participate. Future workshops will be held on different aspects of the climate action plan. These workshops are great opportunities to learn about the county's plan and to provide them with feedback for improving their plan. By emailing David, you'll receive notifications of future workshops. The registration link and David's email are in chat. We always need people to give public comments during the County Board of Supervisor meetings to ensure that the board understands the urgency of the climate crisis. Our combined voices speak volumes, and adding yours makes it that much more powerful. By contacting us, you will receive dates and times of future meetings, instructions for attending, and and talking points that you can write in your own voice. The email address is now in chat. As Kiala discussed earlier, we have the upcoming global climate strike on September 24th. Be sure to sign up. And I will put the registration link into chat. Other ways to get involved are to join one of San Diego 350's many public policy teams and help us advance crucial climate policies. Simply fill out the volunteer interest form and email publicpolicy@sandiego350.org. And I will now place all that information into chat. In chat, you'll find links to our CAP and renewable energy team, transportation team, and all our public policy teams. The link to the volunteer information form and the public policy at sandiego350.org email. Share calls to action. You can always amplify our calls to action. Share calls to action on social media by posting messages on your Facebook groups, messaging your Facebook and Instagram friends, and posting on Twitter and Instagram. In a few days, you'll receive an email with links to the recording and slides. It will include these calls to action and ways to get involved. Please share the email with your friends and network. Also share any future calls to action email and social media posts you get. I want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight, and I hope you gained some knowledge and are now motivated to act. Special thanks to Supervisor Terra Lawson-Remer, Murtaza, Baxamusa, the Sustainability Planning Team, and our panelists, B. Miller, Ann Feeney, Craig Jones, and Kiala Minna. I also want to thank the crew that worked so hard to put on and support this forum and all those who helped promote the event. We'll be sending out the recording and presentation in the next few days. Thank you so much for coming, and I will call this forum adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay, it's a wrap, folks.